Hello my colouring friends, it's me, Liv, Colouring with Liv. So in today's video I'll be colouring a haunted house, and that's in the colouring book Mondes Imaginaire or Imaginary Worlds by Dessain Tolra. And at first I started off with my watercolour pencils. So I woke up one morning and I just took out my box of pencils and started colouring without too much of a plan. I just was like, yes, I'm gonna colour today. And even though I end up colouring over this bit with acrylic eventually, it is good to see how these watercolour pens and how the paper reacts with the water. And it's the first time I'm actually colouring in one of these books by Dessain Tolra. So it was an interesting new experience for me. And so I decided to go with acrylic, and my colouring friend Irena at Black Aneri tells me that I need to buy some gesso, but I haven't got around to buying any gesso just yet. So I just went straight in with acrylic. And I think using acrylic is just like one of the easiest ways of putting down a background. But then I end up tending to carry on working with acrylic throughout the whole of the page. So that's why I think other colorists tend to go for a watercolor background. And I also ended up going right to the edge of the page with a piece of paper underneath. But next time I think I might put some masking tape. And these books are actually pre-scored. So that's why I wasn't going right to the inner edge of that colouring book, which is actually quite a good idea, because in my other colouring book from Petit Poupée, the Disney colouring book by Hachette Heroes, I've been colouring it right inside, and now it's becoming a little bit difficult to open. So I think I have to start using some masking tape as well. So the idea for this colour scheme actually came from after I watched the new Netflix series called Monster. It's about a serial killer called Ed Gein. And he also inspired films like Psycho and the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. So if you don't like gory things, then that's probably not one to watch for yourself. But if you like horror and true crime, then yeah, it's a good one to watch. So I didn't plan this very well. I ended up just going straight in with the brown for the house because I thought, well, wood is brown. So therefore I'm just going to colour this haunted house brown. But then after seeing some photos of Ed Gein's house, his house was actually painted white. But it didn't have to be particularly his house. But then when I was looking at some other illustrations, other people had just made a silhouette of the haunted house. And I thought, well, I won't take advantage of this beautiful illustration by just covering it all one colour as a silhouette. I wanted to actually try and learn how to paint a house. So it was quite an interesting experience, because after having the luxury of having a box of colouring pencils with all the colours and just being able to pick up that same colour whenever I want to use it and use it. But with acrylic, you have to mix it each and every time, and you have to do it before it dries. And if you haven't mixed enough, then you have to do it again. So trying to get that same brown as well was a little bit difficult, but also I was trying out different browns as well at the same time. So you can see that there are some browns that have a little bit more of an orange tint or a reddish tint to them. So I'm also learning that there are things like a medium called a glaze, that you can do a glazing technique, or just using some glaze with acrylic to keep it lasting longer before it dries, so it acts more like oil paint. And then after I coloured this in, I was actually thinking, maybe I should buy some oil paints. But not just yet. It's always so tempting to just want to buy new things. And speaking of unused new things, this was actually one of those colouring books. I had bought it about a year ago and I hadn't used it yet, mainly because the illustrations in the book look better for autumn, because apart from this haunted house, there are also illustrations of mushroom shaped houses, so kind of fantasy illustrations like that. So I kind of kept it for the season, but I also forgot about it at the same time. So the acrylic paint that I'm using is by Liquitex and Sennelier. So I'm just using the basic range. So the one by Liquitex is literally called Basic. It's the basic range. And I first started with the small gift set, and then when I ran out, that's when I ended up buying a couple of single colours from Sennelier ABSTRACT. So that's also their cheapest range. And I started off with some cheap Amazon brushes, and then I ended up buying a few other brushes. I'm still kind of figuring out what brush is right for me. So in this video, I used the Raphael brushes in a number 8 and 2 for the sepia range, and I used the number 8 for the sky and the 2 for the details. And right here where I'm painting those finer details, I'm using my number 0 of my Textura brush, because that is actually the smallest brush that I have, until I kind of did some digging and found, because I thought they had to be acrylic brushes and that I can't touch my watercolor brushes, but I do have some smaller watercolor brushes. So that's when I ended up thinking, I actually have a free brush as part of my Sennelier watercolor set that I didn't actually use for watercolor. I didn't like it, but if it's not good for watercolor, then maybe it'll be good for acrylic. And it was. Oh, and this brush here is the Graduate brush from Dallo Rowney, and I think that's in a number 6. I have to double check that. So this is actually the first time I'm using this brush. So it's an angle brush, and I bought it because I thought maybe I need it for doing some sharp edges. So I had some sharp edges here, and even doing the tree, it kind of created a nice texture effect, I thought. So as my moon looked too much like the sun, I decided actually I need to tone it down and I need to make it a little bit more grey. So I thought kind of maybe some more white from the centre, and then grey coming out. And I thought that because the bottom section has this mist, I thought maybe I can make some mist around the moon as well. So when I put that paint down, it was quite easy to just grab that paint and just spread it around. And at first because the paint was dry underneath, it doesn't mix. And it did create quite a nice effect having that white paint down on dry. But I did end up going back over the background because I just wanted to fix the sky a little bit more. Because when I was going over that tutorial from Michelle the painter, she actually has more bits of purple and green, and maybe I should have done that bit first before doing the moon, but we live and learn. So here I'm just creating that mist with my number 8 sepia brush, and I really love how easy that effect is. It looks so cool. Let me know in the comments below if you've worked in one of these colouring books by Dessain Tolra. So apparently they have 240 GSM of paper, and they are beautifully binded with this hardback. So obviously that's why I couldn't resist but trying out this book. This book was actually chosen by my husband, but the one that I was thinking about getting was from Anna, or Le Joli Paris d'Anna. So I heard about her quite a while back, and I didn't have a chance to get her one of her colouring books then, because she has beautiful illustrations of architecture and like these cute chocolate box houses. And this particular colouring book doesn't have any of those colour printed pages on the left hand side. So that's why my husband chose this one for me, because I don't have a photo reference. He thought that would be too easy. You need to think of something all by yourself and not get distracted by the colour printed page on the other side. But sometimes that could actually be good practice. And at one point of my life, I was obsessed with planners and stickers, and I think that kind of feels like you're creating your own kind of sticker in a way, with those cute watercolour illustrations from these kind of colouring books. Anyway, back to the colouring. So now that I've put that whitish grey moon down, and I was putting more white to kind of create contrast, and now the house looks a little bit too brown, so I was trying to make it a little bit more grey, especially towards the top where you would have that shadow. So yeah, it was coming out, it was starting to come together. And as I kind of progressed, after creating a little bit more contrast with the shadows from the house, I also thought it would be a good idea to create a little bit more contrast in the background around the moon as well. Eventually we'll get to that bit. But I think the hardest thing about this colouring page was not having a proper photo reference and not really deciding too well of what colour should be what and where the shadows and everything should be. So I just kind of tried to look around on Google and everything, you know, to get some kind of photo reference of haunted houses. And, I found a good, nice couple of tutorials. So there was the one from Michelle the painter, and also another one from Ruth Wilshaw, who had more of a purplish background, and she gave me the idea of making silhouettes of the trees and gravestones and a fence in the foreground, which I ended up adding here in the end. So my point is that no matter how much you look around, you still have to create it yourself. And I think the hardest thing was with these white sections, I was thinking, is it supposed to be like that? Do houses look like that with that kind of white highlight, or is it darker? So I was kind of going back and forth whether to add a little bit more darkness, or maybe just more of a beigeish colour, or maybe a slight greyish colour. And should it be darker? Should it be lighter? So I kept going back and forth on this bit. But I like how the bit by the bottom, I didn't quite colour it in completely because it blends in with the mist. So by not colouring that bit, it kind of, I guess it would have been better with watercolour working like that rather than acrylic. But yeah. And then right at the end, to finish it off, I ended up bringing out my micron pens. So I brought out my 005 and I finished off the details of the roof, just giving it extra texture and a little bit of the wood as well. And then because this is a haunted house, just like the one from Monster or Psycho, I thought I could put Mother in the window, just a silhouette of, who he kept looking up at the house of, up in the top window. So that was, I guess, a multitude of inspirations for this haunted house. But yeah, let me know in the comments below if you found any other good haunted house tutorials, or just reference pictures, or even just houses and architecture in general. I'd love to hear your thoughts. I think I've said everything I needed to say about this painting now. I'd love to hear your thoughts if you've liked this at all. If you have, give it a like and subscribe, and I'll leave you with some music now. All right, see you in the next one. Bye.